I recently experienced a type of derealization that was new to me, and so I wanted to talk about it. I'm going to do that in a second, but I also just wanted to say I think it's interesting that dissociation can really be this whole spectrum and can present in so many different ways. And like even here on like healing journey TikTok, therapy TikTok, trauma TikTok, whatever you want to call it, um, I often hear people reference dissociation, but not really like exactly what their experience is. Um, so I thought it would just be helpful to talk about what types of dissociation we experience because experiencing a new form was a little bizarre feeling for me, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I don't hear people talk about it, so I thought I would. So I would say that derealization is the type of dissociation that I experience, but that I experience the least often. I experience depersonalization more often than derealization, but both of those are kind of rare for me. Um, I think intellectual dissociation is very, very common for me. And then I experience a type of dissociation that I don't really have a name for, where it's kind of like a mild fuzziness or whatever, more of like a full dissociation, but not depersonalization or derealization. But in the rare instances that I do experience derealization, it's usually kind of like the environment is moving, like visually moving. But what happened recently was I was laying in bed, my husband was sitting in bed kind of opposite me, and we were just talking, but we had got into some discussion about my like CSA related traumatic coupling, which is something that is still a new realization for me and is brings up a lot of shame, and it's like a big ugly wound that's really hard for me to sit with. And so that got pretty emotional. And what I thought was interesting was when I was at like the peak of emotion and the peak of shame, I was not yet experiencing this depersonalization. I was like kind of having moderate dissociation. But then after I cried and kind of had some relief from like the shame and just the other like big emotions, that's when this type of derealization hit, which I thought was such odd and interesting timing. But what happened was I went to like look at my husband, and suddenly it was like I want to say it's like a pop-up book or like a pop-up card, in that everything but him seemed really flat, and he was like almost like coming at me, which like he wasn't, like he was just sitting on the bed, but it was like he was popped out from the rest of the environment. And also when he made any like normal movements, my perception was that he was moving really rapidly, and so I felt this urge to like freeze in place because it was so disorienting how much he was moving, and also just like the environment was like visually overwhelming to me. And I guessed right away that this was derealization, but because of how, and also with this, like as soon as this started happening, I felt really like dizzy and nauseous. And so I think that's part of why I wanted to freeze too, is just it was so like visually overwhelming that I just kind of like when you're sick and you don't want to like move in bed at all because you feel like that'll cause you to like actually get sick. I was just like freezing. But I asked him if he would Google something like tips for like coming out of derealization, and it like suggested like a temperature thing. So he went to our freezer and we had like a ice pack in there that he had me like hold and focus on, and did some other like grounding type stuff. And thankfully, within just like a minute or so, it largely started to fade. But another thing that I thought was really interesting was like because of the nausea and dizziness, I started closing my eyes at one point and just like focusing on the cold that I was feeling in the ice pack. But when when this started to go away, I could sense it even though my eyes were closed. It was like, oh, I know when I open my eyes, the environment isn't going to be as disorienting, because like I could just feel that something shifted even though my eyes were closed. I don't really know how to end this, I guess, but yeah, I just wanted to share that experience so that maybe somebody else like doesn't feel so alone.